My name is LaDonna, and at 32 I never expected to get that text from my mom while on rounds at Boston Memorial Hospital. Your sister needs a perfect wedding, Mom texted. We are using your college money. I replied, I want her to be happy too. My fingers trembled as I typed those words. Little did she know, I had graduated from Harvard Medical School years ago without a penny of debt, thanks to the software patents that had changed my life. Before I dive into what happened when the wedding venue called about the payment drop, a comment letting me know where you are watching from, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about how I navigated this family drama. Growing up in Northbrook, a comfortable suburb of Chicago, our family looked picture perfect from the outside. My mom Karen was the type of woman who coordinated her nail polish with her purse, and kept our lawn manicured to perfection. Image was everything to her. My dad Harold worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm. He was quieter, more practical, but ultimately followed mom's lead in most family decisions. Then there was my sister Olivia, 2 years younger than me, but somehow always the center of attention. Olivia had that effortless beauty and social grace that made her the natural favorite. She was a cheerleader, homecoming queen, and seemed to collect friends without even trying. She took the traditional path that made our parents proud, especially Mom. I was different from the beginning. While Olivia was out at slumber parties, I was taking apart computers in my bedroom. Mom labeled me as the smart one, which in our family was code for not as pretty or popular as Olivia. I was more introverted, preferred books to parties, and found my passion in technology and science at an early age. When we were young, our parents set up college funds for both of us. I remember the day Dad showed me the statement when I was 10. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Your education is the most important investment we will ever make. Education first," that was our agreement. Those words would echo in my mind years later. The favoritism was subtle at first. Olivia always got new clothes while I got hand-me-downs. Mom would say, "You don't care about fashion anyway, LaDonna." When report cards came, my straight A's would get a quick nod while Olivia's B's and C's were celebrated because she was trying so hard. By the time I was 14, I had taught myself 3 programming languages. My parents thought I was just playing on the computer. Mom would knock on my door at night, "Don't you want to go to the mall with your sister instead of staring at that screen all day?" When I tried explaining what I was creating, her eyes would glaze over. At 16, I developed my first app, a simple program that helped organize study notes and automatically generated practice tests. It gained popularity among students at my high school and eventually spread to other schools. I made about $5,000 that year, which I secretly put away for later. When I showed my parents the positive reviews and the money I had earned, Dad seemed mildly impressed. Mom just said, "That's nice, honey," before quickly changing the subject to Olivia's selection as prom queen. That same week, Mom spent $300 on Olivia's prom dress without blinking, while earlier that month she had complained about the $90 graphing calculator I needed for advanced calculus. The pattern was established early. Olivia's social achievements were celebrated with dinners out and proud phone calls to relatives. My academic and technical accomplishments were acknowledged with polite nods and quickly forgotten. I learned to stop sharing my successes to keep my ambitions to myself. I turned inward and focused on what I could control, which was my own future. By senior year of high school, I had developed a quiet determination. I would succeed, not to prove anything to my family but for myself. I applied to colleges without telling my parents, were secretly hoping to put some distance between us. When the acceptance letter from Massachusetts Institute of Technology arrived with a partial scholarship, I felt a rush of validation that no family dinner could provide. I showed my parents the MIT letter and scholarship offer. Dad said, "That's impressive, but are you sure you want to go so far from home?" Mom said, "MIT is so expensive. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer State University with Olivia? You could be roommates." I smiled and nodded, already knowing my decision was made. The week before I left for college, I overheard Mom talking to her sister on the phone. "I just worry about LaDonna being so far away. She has trouble making friends, you know. Not like Olivia." I closed my bedroom door and packed my computer equipment. Counting the days until I could start fresh somewhere my value wasn't measured against my sister. The day my parents drove me to the airport, Mom hugged me tightly and whispered, "Try to come out of your shell a bit in college, okay? Make some friends." Dad hugged me too and slipped an extra $100 in my pocket. "For emergencies," he said with a wink. Neither of them knew that by this point I had nearly $15,000 saved from my app sales carefully hidden in a separate bank account. As the plane took off toward my new life, I made a promise to myself. I would build something meaningful, something even my mother couldn't diminish or ignore. I just didn't know yet how completely that promise would reshape my future. My first semester at MIT felt like finally breathing after years underwater. I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, who didn't find it strange that I could get excited about elegant code or the beauty of a well-designed algorithm. For the first time, I wasn't the weird girl who spent too much time on computers. I was just LaDonna, and that was enough. I called home every Sunday, a ritual that usually lasted 15 minutes. Mom would talk about Olivia's sorority parties at State University, while Dad would briefly ask about my classes before handing the phone back to Mom. After a few months I started keeping these calls shorter, giving vague answers about school being fine and changing the subject when they asked if I was dating anyone. The partial scholarship covered about half of my tuition that first year. My parents contributed from my college fund for the rest plus housing. I lived frugally, worked at the computer lab for extra money, and continued improving my study app on the site, gradually building a small but steady income stream. Sophomore year brought new challenges and opportunities. In my biomedical computing class we discussed the inefficiencies in medical record systems. Hospitals were transitioning to digital records, but the software was clunky, unintuitive, and prone to errors. One night after a particularly frustrating group project, I sketched out an idea for a better interface, one that would reduce input errors and make the system more intuitive for medical staff. What started as a class project quickly became an obsession. I spent weekends and evenings coding missing parties and study groups. My roommate Julia thought I was crazy burning myself out for a class, but it wasn't about the grade anymore. I saw a real problem I could solve. By the end of sophomore year I had a working prototype of medical record software that was faster and more intuitive than anything on the market. My professor was impressed enough to connect me with a friend at a medical technology startup in Boston. That summer, instead of going home to Chicago, I took an internship with the startup and continued refining my software. The breakthrough came 3 months into my internship. The hospital testing our system reported a 28% reduction in medication errors after implementing my interface. The company executives were impressed, but I knew the core algorithm was mine. With shaking hands I filed for my first patent using almost all my savings to pay the lawyer fees. Junior year began with an unexpected turn. A large medical software company offered to buy my patent for $250,000. I sat in the lawyer's office in stunned silence as he explained the terms. At 20 years old I was being offered more money than my parents had in my entire college fund. After signing the contract I walked around Boston for hours trying to process what had happened. I could pay for the rest of college myself now. I could even apply to medical school, something I had been interested in but thought financially out of reach. That night I called my parents and told them I had received a major scholarship that would cover the rest of my education. Dad asked what kind of scholarship from what organization. I kept it vague. It's for computer science students developing medical applications. Very competitive. Mom seemed surprised but quickly moved on. That's nice, honey. Did I tell you Olivia got into the honor society? We are so proud of her for working so hard. I didn't correct them or explain further. Some part of me wanted to prove myself completely before revealing the full extent of my success. Another part knew that any achievement of mine would somehow be diminished in comparison to whatever Olivia was doing. So I kept my victory private, savoring it alone. With financial pressure lifted, I threw myself even deeper into my work. I developed 2 more medical software innovations during my final years at MIT, both of which I patented. The second patent sold for $180,000 and I decided to hold on to the third, licensing it instead of selling outright. By graduation, I had enough money to pay for medical school several times over. I applied to Harvard Medical School, driven by a growing fascination with how technology could improve patient care. When the acceptance letter came, I felt a surge of pride that needed no external validation. I called my parents with the news about Harvard. Mom seemed genuinely surprised. Medical school. But you're a computer person. Are you sure you want to start over in a new field? Dad was more supportive. That's a prestigious school, Ladonna, but how will you pay for it? Medical school is extremely expensive. I have scholarships lined up, I said. The lie now practiced and smooth. And it'll work while studying. The truth was that I had already paid the first year's tuition in full from my patent money. My licensing agreement was generating steady income and I had investments beginning to grow as well. But explaining all this would mean admitting I had kept secrets for years and would inevitably lead to questions about money from my family. It was simpler to maintain the fiction of scholarships. At my MIT graduation, my parents and Olivia flew in for the ceremony. Mom kept straightening my cap and asking if I was eating enough. Olivia, now working as a marketing assistant at a local firm in Chicago, talked mostly about the guy she was dating and her apartment search. When one of my professors stopped by to congratulate me and mentioned my exceptional work in medical software innovation, Mom looked genuinely confused. "I thought you were a computer science major," she whispered after he left. "I am," I said. "It's a specialization." Dad looked at me with a curious expression as if seeing me clearly for the first time. But the moment passed, and soon they were discussing where to have dinner and whether we should take photos by the river. As we said goodbye at the airport, Mom hugged me tight and said, "We're proud of you, honey. Even if we don't always understand what you're doing." I hugged her back, wondering if that was true and if it would still be true if they knew how their sensible, practical daughter had already made more money than Dad would earn in 5 years. Harvard Medical School was even more demanding than MIT. The workload was relentless, the competition fierce, and the expectation sky high, but for the first time in my life I felt completely in my element, combining my technical knowledge with medical training. I could see the path ahead clearly, a future where I could develop technology that directly saved lives. During orientation week, I paid my full tuition for the first year in a single transaction. The financial aid officer looked at me strangely. "Most students are setting up loan payments right now, not paying in full," she said. I just smiled. The scholarships came through. She glanced at her computer screen. "I don't see any scholarships recorded here." "They are private," I explained smoothly. "Family arrangements." It wasn't entirely a lie. This was my money, my family of one taking care of itself. I rented a small apartment in Boston, nothing fancy but entirely mine. When my parents asked about my living situation, I mentioned roommates who didn't exist to make it seem more affordable. These small deceptions began to pile up, creating a version of my life that fit their expectations and didn't raise uncomfortable questions. The distance between us grew in more ways than geographic. I called home less frequently, using my packed schedule as an excuse. When we did talk, the conversations felt increasingly superficial. Mom would update me on neighborhood gossip, Dad would mention something about taxes or home repairs, and inevitably they would talk about Olivia. My sister had graduated from State University and was struggling to find her footing. She changed jobs 3 times in 2 years, moving from marketing to event planning to retail management. Each time she quit because of difficult bosses or toxic work environments. Mom and Dad helped her with rent when she was between jobs, paid off her credit card debt twice, and bought her a car when hers broke down. I never said anything about this financial support, though I noticed the irony. My college fund had been sacred, meant only for education. Yet they seemed to have no problem using their retirement savings to bail out Olivia from one crisis after another. In my second year of medical school, I developed another software innovation. A diagnostic algorithm that helped identify rare medication interactions. I sold this patent outright for nearly $400,000. By this point, my total net worth was approaching $2 million. All carefully managed through investments and completely unknown to my family. That same year, I met Jackson at a hospital fundraiser. He worked in healthcare administration and was fascinated by the intersection of technology and medicine, just like me. Unlike anyone in my family, he understood my work and valued my ambition. After our third date I told him about my patents and financial situation, the first person I had ever confided in completely. He looked at me with a mixture of admiration and confusion. "Why haven't you told your family?" I stirred my coffee, considering how to explain. They never really understood or valued what I done. Telling them now would change our relationship in ways I am not ready for. Jackson became my partner in all senses of the word. We moved in together in my third year of medical school, sharing a larger apartment with a view of the Charles River. When my parents asked about my new address, I mentioned affordable housing for medical students, another small lie in the growing collection. My graduation from Harvard Medical School was a blur of emotions. I had finished in the top 10% of my class while continuing to develop medical technology on the side. I was completely debt-free with a growing investment portfolio and a partnership with a man who saw me clearly. I should have felt only triumph. My family flew in for the ceremony. Mom cried when I walked across the stage and Dad hugged me with genuine pride. For a brief moment I felt fully seen and appreciated. Then at dinner Mom asked, "So now that school is finally done, when are you two thinking about settling down, children?" "We just moved in together, Mom," I said. "Well, you're not getting any younger and medical residency is so demanding. If you wait too long." I changed the subject, asking about their flight home the next day. Later when I was alone with Dad he asked quietly, "Those scholarships must have been something special. Harvard Medical School without loans is practically unheard of." I nodded, not quite meeting his eyes. "I got lucky." He seemed about to say more but just patted my hand instead. "We're proud of you, kiddo." I started my surgical residency at Boston Memorial the following month. The hours were brutal, the stress constant. Calls home became even more infrequent. I missed Thanksgiving that first year, unable to get away from the hospital. Mom was upset, but I promised to visit at Christmas instead. Jackson and I built our life in Boston, far from my family's influence. We bought a brownstone in Beacon Hill, renovated it slowly and filled it with books and technology. I continued developing medical software alongside my surgical training, filing 2 more patents, and starting to consult for healthcare technology firms. Meanwhile, Olivia remained in Chicago, now working in pharmaceutical sales, a job our parents, friends had helped her secure. She dated a series of men, none lasting more than a few months. Mom and Dad continued to support her financially in various ways, from helping with her condo down payment to paying for her luxury car. The contrast between our lives grew starker each year. I was financially independent, advancing in a demanding career I loved, while my sister seemed stuck in a perpetual early adulthood, still relying on our parents well into her late 20s. Yet in family conversations, Olivia's struggles received sympathy and support while my accomplishments were acknowledged briefly before the subject changed. I built a wall between my 2 lives, the successful surgeon and inventor in Boston, and the dutiful daughter who called home monthly and deflected questions about money. It wasn't honest, but it preserved a fragile peace. I told myself it was simpler this way, Kliana. I never anticipated how dramatically that wall would come crashing down. The call came on a Wednesday evening. I was reviewing patient files in our home office when Olivia's name flashed on my phone screen. I braced myself. It had been months since we'd spoken directly, and she rarely called unless she wanted something. "La Donna, oh my God, you will never believe what happened," Olivia's voice bubbled through the speaker. "What is it?" I asked, already clicking save on my work. "Im eng aget." She practically squealed the words. "His name is Ethan Walker, he's in investment banking, and the ring is absolutely gorgeous, 3 carats at least." I leaned back in my chair, surprised. "Congratulations, Liv, how long have you been dating?" 6 months. "But when you know, right?" I made appropriate excited noises while she described Ethan, the proposal at an expensive Chicago restaurant, and her visions for the wedding. I had a sinking feeling this conversation was headed somewhere beyond just sharing news. "So, we're thinking next June, which doesn't give us much time to plan." "Mom is already looking at venues," she continued. "We're considering the Peninsula Hotel or maybe the Botanical Gardens." "Those sound expensive," I said carefully. "Well, Ethan makes good money, but he's still building his portfolio, you know." And Mom and Dad always said they would help with our weddings. She paused. Actually, that's kind of why I'm calling. There it was. Mom mentioned your college fund still has quite a bit in it since you got all those scholarships. We were hoping. I cut her off. Olivia, that money was set aside for education. But you didn't need ET. And it's just sitting there. Mom already talked to the financial advisor about accessing ET. My pulse quickened. They were planning to use my money without even asking me first. I need to talk to Mom about this, I said, keeping my voice level. Oh, don't be like that, LaDonna. You know how important this day is for a woman. It's my one special day. After extracting myself from the conversation with vague promises to think about it, I sat in stunned silence. The entitlement was breathtaking. The assumption that my money, even money I technically hadn't used, was available for Olivia's fairy tale wedding made my blood boil. Before I could call my mother, my phone pinged with a text message from her. Your sister needs a perfect wedding. We are using your college money. No discussion, no question, just a statement of fact, as if my opinion was irrelevant. I stared at the screen, a decade of accumulated resentment threatening to spill over. Jackson found me like that, still staring at my phone 10 minutes later. What's wrong, he asked, placing a hand on my shoulder. I showed him the text. His eyebrows shot up. Are they serious? That's your money. Technically it's in an account my parents control, I explained. The college fund they set up when I was a kid, but they've always said it was specifically for education. So what are you going to tell them? I thought for a long moment. I could reveal everything now, tell them I didn't need their money because I had millions of my own. But that would lead to questions about why I had hidden my success potential, hurt feelings, and inevitably requests for money from Olivia. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Instead, I typed a reply I knew would buy me time. I want her to be happy too. Then I called my father directly. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice tired. LaDonna, I was going to call you tomorrow. Dad, what is this about using my college fund for Olivia's wedding? He sighed heavily. Your mother is set on giving Olivia the wedding of her dreams. You know how she gets. But that money was for education. You always said that was the priority. I know, sweetheart, I tried to tell her that, but... He paused. Olivia's venue deposit is due next week and they don't quite have enough saved. It's just a loan, really. They'll pay it back. I highly doubt that, I thought, but didn't say. Instead I asked, how much are we talking about? About $40,000 for the venue and initial deposits. I nearly choked. $40,000 for deposits. It's an exclusive place and June is peak wedding season, he explained weakly. Dad, this isn't right. That money was set aside for a specific purpose. I know, I tried to tell your mother that. I really did, his voice dropped to nearly a whisper. But you know how she is when she gets an idea in her head. I did know. Mom had always been the driving force in our family, her will eventually bending everyone else to ET. Dad had never been strong enough to stand against her, not even when it came to major financial decisions like this. Well, I don't agree with this, I said firmly. Talk to your mother then. He sounded defeated already. The conversation with Mom went exactly as I expected. She answered with wedding magazines spread out in front of her. I could hear the pages turning. LaDonna, isn't this exciting? The Walker family is very well connected in Chicago. This wedding will be in all the society pages. Mom, we need to talk about using my college fund. OZ. She dismissed my concern with a verbal wave. You got all those scholarships anyway. This money has just been sitting there and now it can be used for something important. My education was important. I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Of course it was, honey. And it all worked out beautifully. But you don't need this money now and your sister does. Don't you want Olivia to have her special day? The guilt trip right on schedule. I gripped my phone tighter. It's the principle of the matter. That money was designated for education. LaDonna. Her voice took on the sharp edge I remembered from childhood, the tone that brooked no argument. We are family. We help each other. Your sister would do the same for you. I bit back a laugh. Olivia had never sacrificed anything for me in her life. I need to think about this, I said finally. There's nothing to think about. The deposits are due next week. She hesitated, then added. Don't be selfish, LaDonna. Hasn't your sister always supported you? I ended the call shortly after, my mind reeling. The unspoken family hierarchy had never been clearer. Olivia's wedding trumped my education fund because Olivia's happiness had always been the priority. The fact that I hadn't actually needed the money was beside the point. It was the assumption that hurt, the complete disregard for my opinion or consent. That night Jackson helped me as I cried with frustration. For years I've downplayed my success to avoid family drama, and they still found a way to make me feel small. Maybe it's time to stop hiding, he suggested gently. Show them who you really are. I wiped my eyes considering his words. Maybe it was time. But first I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The next morning I took a rare personal day from the hospital. This situation required my full attention. I started by researching the Peninsula Hotel, which Olivia had mentioned as her preferred venue. Their wedding package prices made my eyes water. $80,000 for the basic package, not including flowers, photography or the dress. I called the hotel's event coordinator, posing as Olivia's assistant. I'm just confirming some details about the Walker-Harrison wedding next June, I said smoothly. Let me check our records, the coordinator replied. After a moment of keyboard clicking, she said, I'm not seeing a confirmed booking under those names. We do have a tentative hold, but no deposit has been received. The hold expires this Friday. Thank you so much, I said. I'll let the family know right away. I made similar calls to the other venues Olivia had mentioned. Same story everywhere, tentative holds but no deposits paid. This contradicted what my father had told me about needing $40,000 immediately for deposits. Next I called my parents' financial advisor again, presenting myself as calling on behalf of the family to confirm details. After verifying my identity as the account beneficiary, he revealed something interesting. My college fund had already been partially depleted. Nearly $20,000 had been withdrawn last year, supposedly for educational expenses. But I hadn't received that money. I hadn't needed it. Where had it gone? I scheduled a meeting with my own financial advisor that afternoon. Brian had been managing my investments for years and understood my family situation. You need to establish a paper trail, he advised after I explained the situation. Document everything. If they withdraw money from an account designated for your education and use it for something else, there's potential legal recourse. But more importantly, you need to protect yourself going forward. We spent 2 hours creating a comprehensive financial strategy. I transferred additional funds into accounts solely in my name, documented my patent earnings and investment growth, and prepared statements showing my complete financial picture. Not that I plan to share all this with my family yet, but I wanted to be prepared. Back at home, I created a detailed spreadsheet of wedding costs based on industry averages. Venue, catering, dress, flowers, photographer, band invitations. The total quickly spiraled past $150,000. If this was the kind of wedding Olivia and my mother envisioned, my college fund wouldn't even cover half of it. As I was finishing this analysis, my phone rang with an unfamiliar Chicago number. Is this LaDonna Harrison? A man's voice asked when I answered. Yes, it is. This is Michael Torres, event manager at the Botanical Gardens in Chicago. I am trying to reach someone from the Harrison family regarding the wedding reservation for June 16th. I straightened in my chair. Yes, I am Olivia's sister. How can I help? Well, Miss Harrison, there seems to be an issue with the deposit check that was sent. It was returned for insufficient funds and we have been unable to reach your mother or sister. The date will be released tomorrow unless we receive a valid payment. I closed my eyes briefly. I see. Thank you for letting me know. Has a contract been signed? Yes, your mother signed the initial paperwork last week. The deposit was supposed to follow within 3 business days. And how much is the deposit? $15,000, he replied. More than a third of the total venue cost most likely. Thank you, Mr. Torres. Someone will be in touch about this very soon. After hanging up, I sat motionless, processing this new information. My parents had apparently written a check they couldn't cover, possibly counting on accessing my college fund before it cleared. The financial mismanagement was worse than I had imagined. My phone rang again almost immediately. This time it was my mother. LaDonna, I need to talk to you, she said, her voice tense. Is this about the botanical gardens deposit bouncing? A sharp intake of breath. How did you know about that? The event manager just called me looking for someone in the family. Well, this is exactly why we need to access your college fund immediately, she said, recovering quickly. The venue will cancel if we don't get them the money by tomorrow. I chose my words carefully. Mom, why did you write a check for $15,000 that you didn't have? We thought the funds would be transferred in time, she said defensively. Your father has been talking to the financial advisor. So, you signed a contract and wrote a check based on money you don't actually have access to yet. Don't take that tone with me, young lady, she was getting flustered now. This is why families have savings to help each other in important situations. I took a deep breath. Is Olivia's wedding the only thing this money has been used for? Silence on the other end of the line. Mom, has money already been taken from my college fund? We helped Olivia with some expenses last year, she admitted reluctantly. Just small things. How small? Another pause. $20,000? For what, I pressed. Her condo needed some repairs. And she had some credit card debt from when she was between jobs. And her car needed work. So, you've already spent $20,000 of my college fund on Olivia's living expenses. You weren't using it, she burst out. The money was just sitting there and your sister needed help. What were we supposed to do, let her get evicted? I bit back the retort that Olivia could have lived within her means, or taken a second job. Instead I said, we need to have a family meeting about this. All of us together. There's no time for that. The venue needs an answer by tomorrow. Then I guess Olivia will need to find a different venue. My mother gasped, you can't be serious, she's your sister. And it's my money, Mom. Money that was promised for my education. But you got scholarships, you didn't need ET. That doesn't make it available for whatever you want to use it for, I replied evenly. We need to talk, all of us, before any more financial decisions are made. I hung up before she could respond. Within minutes my phone was flooded with texts from both my mother and Olivia, ranging from guilt trips to anger to pleading. I silenced my phone and turned to Jackson, who had been listening to my side of the conversation. Family meeting, he asked. I nodded. It's time they knew the truth. That evening a tearful Olivia called me directly. LaDonna, please. She sobbed. The Botanical Gardens was my dream venue. If we lose this date, everything is ruined. Olivia, why did Mom and Dad write a check they knew would bounce? They thought it would be fine once they accessed some of the investments, she said between sniffles, but there's a waiting period or something. Please, LaDonna, I can't lose this venue. Ethan's family is already judging me for not having a wedding planner. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Did you know they already took $20,000 from my college fund last year? A pause in the crying. Well, I knew they helped me with some things, but I didn't know where the money came from exactly. I sighed. Olivia, we need to have a serious family discussion about finances. This can't continue. But the venue, she wailed, ignoring my point entirely. I'll talk to Mom and Dad about arranging a family meeting this weekend. I can fly to Chicago. But the deposit is due tomorrow. Then you might need to look at other venues, or push the wedding date back. The wailing increased. I kept my resolve firm, ending the call with a promise to see her soon. Then I booked a flight to Chicago for Friday evening, and sent a group text to my family, informing them I would be arriving for an important discussion on Saturday morning. My mother's reply was immediate: "We need to resolve the venue issue before then." I responded simply, "That will be part of our discussion." Then I began gathering all my financial documents, preparing for a conversation that was long overdue. The time for hiding my success was over. The time for setting boundaries had arrived. The flight to Chicago gave me time to organize my thoughts and steel my nerves. Jackson had offered to come with me for moral support, but I knew this was something I needed to handle alone. This confrontation had been brewing for years, possibly my entire life. I checked into a hotel rather than staying with my parents, another small assertion of independence that would not go unnoticed. When I arrived at their house Saturday morning, the tension was palpable. Mom had arranged coffee and pastries in the living room, as if this were a social call rather than a financial intervention. Olivia and Ethan were already there, sitting close together on the couch. Ethan was exactly as I had imagined. Tall, conventionally handsome, with the confident demeanor of someone who had never worried about money. He stood to shake my hand, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "So you're the mysterious sister," he said. "Olivia talks about you constantly." I highly doubted that. Mom bustled in with the coffee pot. "LaDonna, you remember how Olivia takes her coffee? Would you pour while I get the creamer?" A small power play assigning me a serving role. I ignored it and took a seat instead. "Actually, Mom, let's get straight to the purpose of this meeting." She frowned but sat down. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his armchair, not meeting my eyes. "Zoe, the botanical gardens called," Mom began, clearly wanting to control the narrative. "They've agreed to hold the date until Monday, if we can guarantee the deposit." I folded my hands in my lap. "Before we discuss Olivia's wedding venue, I think we need to address some broader financial issues." "This isn't the time," LaDonna, Mom said dismissively. "We have an immediate situation to resolve." "Actually, this is exactly the time," I countered. "I've learned that $20,000 was already taken from my college fund last year for Olivia's expenses. Now you're looking to take another $40,000 for wedding deposits. That's $60,000 of money that was designated for my education." Olivia fidgeted with her enormous engagement ring. "I didn't know they were using your college fund for my condo repairs. They just offered to help." Dad finally spoke up. "We always intended to replace that money, LaDonna. It was meant to be a temporary loan." I turned to him. "And when exactly would that have happened?" "Dad, you and Mom are nearing retirement age. You've told me yourself that your savings aren't where they should be." Mom cut in sharply. "This isn't appropriate discussion for mixed company," she said with a glance at Ethan. Ethan cleared his throat. "Perhaps I should step out for this family discussion." "No, you should stay," I said. "Since you're marrying into this family, you should understand the financial dynamics." Mom shot me a warning look, which I ignored. I reached for my bag and pulled out a folder of documents. "I've been doing some research. The wedding you're planning would cost approximately $150,000 based on the venues and vendors you've been considering. My college fund, even if completely liquidated, wouldn't cover half of that. That's why we're only asking for help with the deposits," Olivia said quickly. "Ethan's parents are contributing too." I raised an eyebrow. "And the rest?" "We're figuring it out," she mumbled. I took a deep breath. Now seems like the appropriate time to be completely honest with all of you. For years I've allowed you to believe that my education was funded entirely through scholarships. That's not true." The room went silent. "I graduated from MIT and Harvard Medical School without any student loans, but not because of scholarships. I paid for it myself." "That's impossible," Mom scoffed. "Medical school costs hundreds of thousands of dollars." I nodded. "It does." I handed her the first document from my folder, a statement showing the payment of my final year of medical school tuition. It was in full, one sum from my personal account. She stared at it, confusion creasing her brow. "I don't understand." "During my sophomore year at MIT, I developed a specialized medical records interface. I patented it and sold it for $250,000. Dad's mouth fell open. "What?" I continued, my voice steady. Since then I've developed 5 additional medical technology patents. 2 I sold outright, 3 I license for ongoing revenue. I handed them the next document, a summary of my patent earnings. I've earned approximately $3 million from these innovations. The silence in the room was deafening. 4 pairs of eyes stared at me in disbelief. That's not possible, Mom finally whispered. I passed them the next document, a statement of my current net worth professionally prepared by my financial advisor. The bottom line showed just over $5 million. Dad put on his reading glasses, examined the paper, then removed them again, his hands shaking slightly. Why didn't you tell us? The question held no accusation, just genuine bewilderment. It nearly broke my composure. At first it was because I wanted to prove I could do it on my own, I explained. Then when the money started becoming significant I worried it would change our relationship. I paused. And based on past experiences I feared my accomplishments would be downplayed in comparison to other priorities. Mom flinched at that. I turned to her directly. When I called home with news about my first patent, you changed the subject to Olivia's new boyfriend within 2 minutes. When I got into Harvard Medical School, your first question was whether I was sure I wanted to change fields. That's not fair, she protested weakly. Isn't it every achievement of mine has been acknowledged briefly then forgotten? Meanwhile Olivia's every move is celebrated, supported and now apparently funded with my money. The room fell silent again. Olivia stared at her hands, her cheeks flushed. Ethan looked increasingly uncomfortable. Dad broke the silence. We're so sorry, LaDonna. We had no idea. Mom wasn't ready to concede. If you're so successful, why would you begrudge helping your sister with her wedding? Clearly you can afford it, and there it was. The pivot had been expecting from taking my college fund to expecting me to pay for the wedding because I could afford it. The entitlement was breathtaking. This isn't about what I can afford, I said evenly. It's about respect and boundaries. For years I've hidden my success to avoid exactly this, being seen as a checkbook rather than a daughter. That's ridiculous, Mom snapped. We're family. Family helps each other. Does it? When has Olivia ever been asked to sacrifice for me? Olivia looked up indignant. That's not fair, I was always supportive of your weird computer stuff. Were you? Because I remember you making fun of me for spending weekends coding instead of going to parties. I remember you telling your friends I was the boring sister. She had the grace to look embarrassed. I turned back to my parents. The issue here isn't that I can't help with Olivia's wedding. It's that you assumed you could take money designated for my education without even having a real conversation with me about it. It's that you've consistently prioritized Olivia's wants over my needs. It's that you still can't see me clearly even now. Tears welled in my mother's eyes. I never meant to make you feel less important. But you did, Mom. Over and over again. Dad reached for my hand. LaDonna, we're so proud of what you've accomplished. I had no idea you were so successful. His voice cracked. I wish you'd felt you could share that with us. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside me. I squeezed his hand back. I wish I had too, Dad. Mom wiped her eyes, visibly struggling to process everything. So you have all this money but you let us believe you were just getting by on a resident's salary. I nodded. My brownstone in Beacon Hill is paid for. My car is paid for. I have no debt. I have a partnership with a healthcare technology firm that generates significant income beyond my surgical residency. Ethan's eyebrows shot up at the mention of Beacon Hill, one of Boston's most expensive neighborhoods. Why the deception, Mom pressed? Because I knew the moment you discovered I had money you'd see me differently. And I was right. Your first response was to ask why I wouldn't pay for Olivia's wedding, not to celebrate what I've accomplished. The room fell silent again, the truth of my words hanging in the air. Olivia finally spoke, her voice small. I'm sorry, LaDonna. I never realized. She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. I believe you, I said softly. You've been raised to believe your happiness comes first. That's not entirely your fault. Mom bristled. Now you're blaming us for how we raised you. I met her gaze steadily. I'm stating facts, Mom. Olivia has received financial support well into adulthood. Her wants have consistently been prioritized over my needs. When she needed money, you took it from my college fund without discussing it with me first. These are not accusations, they're realities we need to acknowledge if we're going to move forward as a family. Dad squeezed my hand again. She's right, Karen. We have favored Olivia. We've enabled her dependence while underestimating LaDonna. Mom looked stricken, tears flowing freely now. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. I know, Mom. I softened my tone. But intentions and impact are different things. Where do we go from here? Dad asked quietly. I took a deep breath. First, no more money will be taken from my college fund without my explicit permission. Second, we need to have honest conversations about finances as a family going forward. And third, I felt a small smile form. I think it's time you all came to visit me in Boston so you can see my life as it truly is. The weeks following our confrontation were strained. Mom barely spoke during the remainder of my visit to Chicago, processing her emotions in silence. Dad called me daily after I returned to Boston, asking questions about my work and life that he had never thought to ask before. Olivia sent a lengthy email apologizing for her assumptions and entitlement, which felt like the first truly adult communication we had ever shared. The Botanical Gardens venue was lost. They released the date when no deposit arrived by Monday. Olivia was devastated initially but came to accept it as a necessary reset for wedding planning. Ethan, to his credit, suggested they scale back their plans to something they could manage financially, without placing a burden on either family. Mom and I had our first real conversation 3 weeks after the confrontation. She called late one evening, her voice hesitant. I owe you an apology, LaDonna. A real one. I sat down on my couch, surprised by her directness. I'm listening. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began. About how we raised you and Olivia. About the messages we sent you, both intentionally or not. She paused. You were right. We did favor Olivia. I think because she seemed to need more and you were always so capable and independent. It's a common dynamic, I acknowledged. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. But that's no excuse. She took a deep breath. I was so focused on making sure Olivia was okay that I never stopped to celebrate how extraordinary you are. And then, when you kept your success private, I felt hurt that you hadn't trusted us. I understand that, Mom. Trust goes both ways, though. I know. She paused again. Your father and I've been talking about our finances, about retirement, about how we've been enabling Olivia. We're making changes. What kind of changes? We've told her we won't be providing any more financial support. She's 30 years old. It's time she stood on her own 2 feet. I was genuinely surprised. How did she take that? Not well at first. She cried, accused us of loving her less than you. Mom gave a rueful laugh. But after a few days, she and Ethan sat down and created a realistic budget for the first time. They've scaled back the wedding significantly. It's going to be at the lake house now, just 50 guests. That sounds lovely actually, I said, meaning it more personal. It does, doesn't it? There was a smile in her voice. And more importantly, they can afford it themselves. The conversation marked a turning point. It wasn't an immediate transformation, but it was the beginning of a new, more honest relationship with my family. Dad called the following week with a hesitant question. LaDonna, I know you're very successful now, but I was wondering. Would you like what's left in your college fund? It's rightfully yours. Actually, Dad, I have a different idea, I replied. Why don't you and Mom use it for your retirement? Consider it a thank you for giving me a start in life. His voice caught. We can't accept that. You can. And you should. It's not a huge amount, but it might help you feel more secure. After some convincing, he agreed. It felt good to give back, to help my parents secure their future in a way that maintained their dignity and independence. 2 months after our confrontation, Jackson and I flew to Chicago to visit my family. This time we stayed with my parents and I watched with amusement as they tried to reconcile their image of their plain practical daughter with the successful doctor and inventor who arrived with her equally accomplished partner. Mom had prepared my old bedroom, now a guest room. When we arrived I found she had framed my MIT and Harvard diplomas and hung them prominently on the wall alongside printouts of my patent certificates that she must have researched online. The sight brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I thought it was time we properly celebrated your achievements," she said quietly from the doorway. I hugged her tightly, feeling a wall between us crumbling. During that visit we had dinner with Olivia and Ethan. My sister seemed different, more grounded. She talked about her job with new purpose, having recently received a promotion after committing herself more fully to her career. "The wedding planning is actually going better now that we've simplified," she admitted. "We're focusing on what matters to us, not what will impress other people." I raised my glass. To focusing on what truly matters. Everyone clinked glasses, the tension of our last gathering replaced by a cautious warmth. As promised, Olivia and Ethan saved for their own wedding with modest contributions from both sets of parents that were freely given, not expected. When Olivia asked if I would be her maid of honor, I accepted with genuine happiness. The lake house wedding was indeed lovely, intimate and meaningful, in a way a grand hotel affair could never have been. Standing beside my sister as she said her vows, I felt a new connection to her. One based on mutual respect rather than old patterns and expectations. During the reception, I gave a toast that brought both laughter and tears. "To Olivia and Ethan," I said, holding up my champagne. Growing up, Olivia and I were very different people with very different paths. For many years I think we both felt that meant we couldn't truly understand each other. I smiled at my sister. But in recent months I've discovered that our differences don't have to divide us. They can strengthen us if we approach each other with honesty and respect. Olivia wiped away a tear, nodding. "The road to this beautiful day hasn't always been smooth," I continued. "But sometimes the bumps in the road force us to slow down and reassess our direction. They make us question whether we're moving forward for the right reasons and with the right people by our side." She looked radiantly happy beside Ethan, who gazed at her with genuine adoration. "Today I see two people who have chosen each other for all the right reasons, who are building a life based on love and mutual support, not expectations or appearances." I raised my glass higher. "To my sister and her husband, may your marriage be built on the strong foundation you've already begun to create. And may we all remember that family isn't about what we can get from each other but how we can help each other grow into our best selves." The applause was warm and Olivia's hug was genuine when I returned to my seat. Mom squeezed my hand wordlessly, her eyes glistening. In the year that followed, our family dynamics continued to evolve. Mom and Dad visited Boston, staying in our guest room and finally seeing my life as it truly was. They toured the hospital where I worked, met my colleagues and began to understand the importance of the technology one was developing. One evening during their visit, Dad and I sat on my rooftop deck overlooking the city lights. "I never properly apologized," he said quietly. "For not standing up for you more. For not seeing you clearly." I took his hand. "You see me now. That's what matters. I am so proud of you, LaDonna. Not just for your success but for your integrity. For building a life on your own terms." The words I had longed to hear for so many years. I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling at peace. Olivia and Ethan settled into married life with a new financial maturity. They bought a modest home they could actually afford. And Olivia called me regularly for advice on investing and saving. Our conversations expanded beyond money to career goals, personal growth and eventually her pregnancy news shared with me before anyone else. Mom rediscovered her interests beyond micromanaging her daughters' lives. She joined a book club, took up watercolor painting and began volunteering at a literacy program. With each phone call she seemed more fulfilled, more herself. The journey wasn't perfect. Old habits occasionally resurfaced. Old hurts sometimes flared. But we faced them honestly without the layers of secrets and assumptions that had defined our relationships for so long. The most valuable lesson I learned through all of this wasn't about money or success. It was about the courage to be seen fully, for who you are, to stand firm in your worth, even when others don't recognize it, and to offer forgiveness when it's truly earned. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't sacrifice or compromise. Sometimes it's setting clear boundaries that allow genuine relationships to flourish. Sometimes it's having the difficult conversations that clear the air and make space for new understanding. And sometimes the family you were born into needs to be reinvented before it can truly support who you've become. What about you? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family over finances or felt undervalued despite your accomplishments? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember, your worth isn't determined by others' recognition but by staying true to yourself. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to be authentically you in all your relationships.